Move on to a different topic here, medical cannabis. And one of the questions from our audience is, what steps will you take to ensure safe access to medical cannabis for the sick and suffering residents of Mountain View? And we'll start with Aaron.
Well, I think this is a an issue that has come up among us a couple times, and I think that the way that I envision medical cannabis or medical marijuana working in the city of Mountain View is put it inside CVS, no other options. I think that if a doctor is going to prescribe medical marijuana to somebody, and we as a city or as a state have decided that's a useful medicine, then great, let's make it a medicine. Let's not put a pot club in our city, because I think that those are kind of the safety concerns that are being asked about. And whereas if you sell your medical marijuana or your medical cannabis in your CVS, just like any other relatively dangerous drug, you can go to your CVS and buy Vicodin if you're prescribed it, and that does help certain people. And yet we don't really have a Vicodin abuse problem that I know of in Mountain View. There's not a large population that's abusing Vicodin. And I think that's because it's sold in a CVS and it's not sold on a corner or in a pot club. So I think that it's a pretty simple way to address that issue.
Thank you, Aaron. Margaret, same question. What steps will you take to ensure safe access to medical cannabis for the sick and suffering residents of Mountain View?
Thank you. So we recently discussed this issue at the council level, and I do support medical marijuana dispensaries. The question is where they should be located and how they should be regulated. And I do believe in regulation. The federal government, it's still illegal at that level, and so I think it's incumbent on us as a city to have some policies and guidelines around where these dispensaries should be located. My main concerns are safety, also in terms of the product, the safety of the product and the quality of the product. I have kids. I frankly don't want to have a dispensary near schools. It's just my opinion. But and so we've been working on this issue. We continue to work on this issue as to where they should be located. Perhaps there should be a number of how many we should have. I haven't really made a decision on that, but I do believe that we should have some guidelines around it, and so that we can ensure that, as you mentioned, the safe access to it's medicine, and I think sick people should have access to medicine, but it should also be treated as medicine.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
This is obviously a very sticky subject for a lot of people. Due to our California initiative process, I think there's a lot of issues that are thrown into the hands of people who are unprepared to deal with it. In this case, the city's been given this hot potato to deal with, and it's something that is not clearly defined. It's something that conventional business will have nothing to do with because of the fact that it's still regulated federally, because of the fact that there are no real clearly defined guidelines from a state level that really guide how this is done. I don't think the city of Mountain View should be in the business of testing marijuana. I don't think the city of Mountain View should be taxing marijuana. I don't think that we want to get deeply involved in this. I would support an ordinance allowing cannabis dispensaries in Mountain View simply because the voters voted for the initiative, they passed it into law, and it behooves the city of Mountain View to allow people the access to their medicine. From a realistic standpoint, barring any change in activities that my brother is currently engaged in, totally unrelated to my candidacy, I would probably have to recuse myself from any vote related to it anyway. So,
okay. Jack.
Yeah, this has come before the council. We spent endless hours talking about it. We did pass an emergency ordinance to say we need to study it. And the key is what's coming out, as some of my other colleagues said, is location and regulation. I feel safety is one of the most critical issues of anything we do. I don't think we would allow any food stand to open up without being inspected and look at what they're selling. Certainly, my preference would be to dispense it as a medicine through a pharmacy. I really think that would be the way to go. Our police chief, who is very well known and respected in the area, indicates to us that only 2 to 3% of the medical quote unquote marijuana is really for medicine. It's mostly recreational. We have a big measure. I think it's measure 19. It's on the ballot coming up this fall. I don't know what that's going to mean. I don't think anybody knows what that means. If it passes, that means it's legal in the state. It doesn't have to be medical. It can be recreational. So I really don't know what that means. I don't want it close to schools. I want to know what's being sold. I don't care what people do with them, for themselves. If they want to smoke marijuana, hey, I don't want to regulate what people do if they want to do it. I really have I don't want to do that. But again, it should be regulated, where it's going to be, what is sold, and other aspects of it. So we have a study going on right now that'll come back to us probably very early next year that is being done, and a potential ordinance that's being written. It'll come back to council for deliberation, and we'll look at the facts, and we'll look at what we think the best regulations will be, and we'll all vote on it and see where we go from there. So that's my stand on it.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Dan.
It sure seems like there's a lot of talk. I mean, I really don't think it's all that complicated an issue. I mean, marijuana is, and I think in many people's eyes, no more dangerous than alcohol. And alcohol is sold, everywhere. It's sold at your grocery store. So why be restrictive to nothing within 1,000 feet of a school? Why not 1,001 or 500? It's arbitrary, and it doesn't make any sense to me to be so inflexible with either the location, the city, or the number of clubs. I mean, let the market decide what makes the most sense. The other issue is it's something that people who are ill use to make them cope with life. Why would we consider regulating or delaying that? I think the better answer is just say it's okay right now, and let's see what happens. Let's see how it falls out. If there's problems, then resolve it from there. But the other issue is Proposition 215 was passed 10 years ago or something. Why has it taken so long for the city to come up with any kind of plan? I mean, the other issue is if marijuana is considered like a medicine, as many people have said, I'm not aware of any cases where someone hasn't ingested a fatal amount of marijuana. It's simply not the same. It's as though you ate too much basil. Great, maybe you'll have a sick stomach, but you're not going to die. And then finally, regarding the regulation of the quality, do we have inspectors at the farmers market? Are people inspecting herbs and vegetables and things there? I don't think so. So it's really no different than that. So I would be, not for any regulation, no more restrictions than just any old business that goes in the city, and make sure that they comply with, to whom the product should be sold to in a legal manner.
Okay. And Bernit.
Yes, this is an issue where the wisdom of Solomon would be very welcome to me. I've said before, I'm a very long-term survivor of cancer, and so I have every sympathy for people who need marijuana to deal with chemotherapy or with pain. And that said, it's still an illegal substance. When the voters of California, myself included, voted for medical pot dispensaries, we just voted for the idea. We did not vote on a process. And the process of how to grow it, how to transport it, how to distribute it, there are no rules for that. And at this point, it's an illegal substance, so there is, we are told by our police chief, a risk of violence involved. So, in the best of all possible worlds, you need marijuana, you go to the pharmacy, you pick it up, you go home, you use it, that's fine. At this point, because it's a federally controlled substance, pharmacies are not ready to get involved in it. we will see what happens with Proposition 19, Measure 19, or whatever it is. Maybe that will change the whole environment if it's no longer a controlled substance in California. Maybe it can be sold openly and freely, and we don't have to be disturbed by risks of violence. So I am looking forward to our city attorney trying to bring some options to us for what would be workable in Mountain View.
Great. Thank you, Ronit. Okay. So we'll move on now to public safety. And the question here is, if Mountain View had a natural gas line explosion, as San Bruno just had, what actions would you take as a council member, and what actions would you take now to prevent one? And we'll start with Dan.
Well, I mean, it seems like the first step is making sure that you know the parties involved, the safety officers, have a plan for this kind of thing, for a horrific explosion and a sort of out of control fire. The tough part is I've heard that because that main in San Mateo was so large that it simply couldn't be shut off. If they did immediately or abruptly shut it off, gas mains all over the Bay Area would have blown up correspondingly. So it's a tough one. I think the other factor is to make sure that the city is on the utilities case to make sure that the existing pipelines have been inspected and approved by people to make sure that they're safe, and replace things that are outside sort of their safety factor for when they need to be replaced. So I think the big one is just prepare for the worst and certainly hope for the best, that those kind of things don't happen, and make sure that we're not caught off guard, and make sure that people know where their pipelines are, and make sure that all the safety officials have a nice little notebook that says this is the page you turn to when something happens with the gas pipeline. So.
Okay, Jack.
Yeah, the day after the accident occurred, I called my city manager and the head of public works and asked them immediately to find out if there were any at-risk pipelines in the city of Mountain View. Fortunately, there aren't any. That's the good news. The bad news is there are still pipelines, and they have certain criteria that they're supposed to be maintained. They have a longevity that's estimated, lifetime that's estimated. And we are really pushing PG&E. I know we've already had a number of meetings with PG&E to tell us exactly what's going on with the pipelines that do run with Mountain View. In terms of what we would do about it, we have one of the best fire departments and police departments in the Bay Area. Not only that, but we have reciprocity agreements with Sunnyvale, with Los Altos, and with Palo Alto and others that would support us in the event of a big accident like this. In addition to that, we're putting together scenarios of how more specific scenarios based on a model of what has occurred north of here, how we would precisely go after it and try to control it. I think the response to that one was very good, and I don't think we participated in that one. Mountain View did not, but we normally do. We send people, our own firemen or policemen or whoever are needed to help other cities as well. And we have that structure in place, so that's the good part. It's not like this is a new thing. We have had 10 alarm fires here, or 5 alarm fires, or other cities have, and we all support each other. So the concept of what would we do would be not a new concept. The important thing is to try to prevent it from happening by working with PG&E and others to make sure that it does not happen.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Aaron.
Well, I think, first of all, I'm very thankful that we do have a great fire department and police department within the city of Mountain View. And I think that if in a very devastating event like this were to occur, minimizing loss of life should be the number one priority for the city council. I definitely, am in full support of efforts to continue a partnership with PG&E to try to, minimize the risk of something like this happening. But in the case of San Bruno, the actual pipe that exploded wasn't even on the list of at-risk pipes. It was in fact a pipe that was mistakenly replaced with the wrong pipe. So PG&E itself actually thought that the pipe was fine. It was a mistake. And that type of mistake is pretty hard to control for. But I think that if you continue the partnerships with both the fire department to develop a contingency plan, modeling out what a fire would look like, you can develop a very solid plan to evacuate citizens and get them to safe areas, really to minimize the impact on the community. Because at the end of the day, when a disaster strikes, it's a disaster because we didn't know about it. And so we need to build community plans that are able to identify key areas as to, how is the fire department going to get somewhere, get from point A to point B when the road is exploded? And how are you going to get the people out of the community?
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Margaret.
Yes, definitely. We've been talking with PG&E, working with them to see what the status of our city here is. And, we do our best to be prepared for emergencies, but the reality is we can't predict what's going to happen. So that's where I think it's important for us, and what we've done is to put our public safety as a priority. That's been a priority for me in my 4 years. And I am really proud to say that I believe we have the best police, fire, and emergency response team in Mountain View when I compare it to other cities around us. I've actually been to police trainings. I've actually gone into live burn trainings where I suited up as a firefighter and went into a burning building to try to really understand what our police and firefighters have to do in times of emergencies. And so I've supported investments in these areas. We have a new fire fleet that's more efficient, safer, greener, where I've initiated building a permanent fire station number 5 out in the North Bayshore area as we have businesses continuing to grow out there. And we've also invested in technology. We have a consolidated interoperability system that we're working on, a regional system. We have this new Alert SCC reverse 911 calling system. So when there's an emergency, we can call out to the community and give instructions, let them know what's happened and what to do, where to go. So I think that the key is really to continue to invest in and make sure that our public safety and emergency response departments have what they need to respond to any kind of disaster that we may, hopefully we won't, but if we do have, that we'll be prepared. One area that I do want to focus on in the next term, if I'm reelected, is we have an emergency operations center under our police admin building, and we need to invest in that to be fully prepared. So that would be one area I want to focus on.
Okay, great. Greg?
What happened in San Bruno is a horrible, horrible tragedy. But I think that people are really quick to be reactionary in these type of events. What could whose fault was it? Who should have done this? Who should have done that? And I think that to a certain extent, yes, we do want to work with PG&E immediately to identify if there's any pressing issues, pending problems. I think they've already done that. Like Jack said, they've identified that there are no pressing issues, no at-risk pipelines in Mountain View, but there are many pipelines. And these are, things that are at risk, both on their own and as part of perhaps a larger, natural catastrophe. It's been a long time since we've had a big earthquake, and it will come. And I think the most important thing is to continue to support, a properly staffed and properly funded public safety system. And to be proactive, and look into, how we could perhaps, prevent certain types of tragedies from happening, or how to best deal with things like a pipeline explosion or in relation to an earthquake, and just make sure that we're ready for it when it does happen. And not point fingers or put undue burden on utilities out of the gate. But I think it's a very important topic, and and obviously public safety, it's kind of a given, really, and would have my full support in every way.
Okay, thank you. And Ronit?
Yes, thank you. So when the tragedy happened in San Bruno, I of course also talked with our staff about what they were doing, the contacts that they were having with PG&E, what we knew about the condition of pipes in Mountain View. Like Margaret, I fully support the best training and tools that we can possibly give our safety personnel. The good news is the infrastructure that the city controls is very well maintained. So in Mountain View, we've been maintaining the infrastructure year in, year out. The pipes that we ourselves control, we know are in good shape. An emergency will eventually happen, and there's no way to prevent it. So my personal spin on what the city needs to do is we as residents also need to be prepared to deal with emergencies. And many of our neighborhoods have CERT teams, community emergency response teams, and the city supports these teams, and the neighborhood associations help each other build these teams, train together, train with our fire department. It was high on my list of priorities when I got elected to council to ensure that every neighborhood had a team like that. Now, it's easier to get people to participate in a neighborhood CERT team when there's just been an earthquake. Everyone is all motivated, and the neighborhood association meets, and we have these discussions and lists, and we're all energized, and then some time passes and we kind of forget about it. But it's a very, very critical element because, you know, we have wonderful safety personnel, but we have just so many of them. We, the residents, need to be prepared also, and it's important for us to work on being prepared.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie.